The soup was still hot when the razor appeared. March 14, 1935. Chez Louis Restaurant, Lower Manhattan, 8:51 PNC. 8:51 p.m., a Tuesday. Unremarkable weather. Light rain, the kind that makes the city hiss. Lucky Luciano was seated at his usual corner table, the one with a clear sight line to both the front door and the kitchen entrance, the one he always requested, the one nobody else sat at because everyone who mattered knew it was his. He had a bowl of ribollita in front of him, a glass of Barolo he hadn't touched yet. Across from him, a shipping broker named Ederoi Rossi, who wanted to discuss moving cargo through Newark docks, which was really about letting Lucky's goods move through Newark docks without anyone asking questions about contents, which was really about money, which was what everything was about. The conversation was unremarkable, routine. Then the man from the kitchen appeared behind Lucky's left shoulder, not a waiter. The posture was wrong. Waiters move apologetically, angled away from the table. This man moved through the restaurant the way sharks move through water, directly, purposefully, without any wasted motion whatsoever. Lucky felt the air change a half second before the steel touched his skin. That half second was going to matter. His name was Salvatore Sal Brutti. 38 years old, born in Palermo, arrived in New York at 15 with nothing, built himself into something through the specific talents that organized crime prizes above all others. Absolute fearlessness, precision, and an almost inhuman tolerance for violence. He carried a straight razor, not a knife. A razor. 7 inches of folded Sheffield steel, so sharp it had shaved men in the morning and opened them in the evening. Sal Brutti had 21 confirmed kills, every one of them close, every one of them personal. He was the most trusted enforcer of Salvatore Maranzano's surviving loyalists, a faction that had never accepted Lucky's 1931 reorganization of the New York underworld that had been waiting 4 years for the right moment, the right place. The right opportunity to send a message that would shake Lucky's empire at its foundation. A public humiliation was worth more than a private killing. That was their reasoning. Make it visible. Make it witnessed. Make it a story that would spread through every restaurant, every social club. Every back room from Brooklyn to the Bronx, Lucky Luciano sat at his corner table, and a man put a razor to his throat, and Lucky Luciano didn't move. At 8:51 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, Sal Brutti executed the first part of that plan perfectly. The razor touched Lucky's throat. The cold was the first thing, then the pressure. Not pain, not yet, just the certainty of what could happen from the edge against the skin. Lucky did not move. Across the table, Edoardo Rossi went completely white. His soup spoon dropped. The sound of it hitting the bowl seemed enormous in the sudden silence, because the restaurant had gone silent, not all at once. Table by table, like a wave moving outward from the corner, as diners looked up and saw the impeccably dressed man sitting very still at the corner table with a stranger's arm extended over his shoulder and the particular gleam of Sheffield steel at his throat. Forks paused midair. Conversations died. Even the kitchen noise seemed to drop, as if sound itself had decided this moment deserved reverence. Lucky's bodyguard, Enzo, was 4 steps away, had already risen half out of his chair, hand inside his jacket, eyes locked on Bruni's face, calculating. Bruni's partner, positioned by the door, had a .38 out and aimed directly at Enzo. "Don't," the partner said. His voice filled the whole restaurant. "Don't move. Anyone moves, this ends very badly right now." Enzo froze. His hand came back out of his jacket. Empty. Very slowly, Lucky raised both hands, palms facing outward. A gesture of surrender that was not surrender. A gesture that said, "I see you, I hear you, I'm listening." "You know who sent me," Brutti said. His English was accented. Sicilian, the particular music of Palermo's streets embedded in every syllable. "You know what this is?" "I can guess," Lucky said. His voice was perfectly calm. Even the voice of a man discussing business, not a man with a razor against his carotid. "Tell me anyway." Something flickered across Bruni's face. The script he'd been given didn't include this. It included panic, or rage, or the desperate bargaining of a frightened man. It did not include a question asked in a conversational tone. "Maranzan's people," Brutti said. "The ones you forgot to finish. They haven't forgotten you. They want the Brooklyn numbers back. They want the waterfront back. They want you to resign from the commission and recommend Balomo for your seat. He pressed the razor slightly tighter. Or they want you in the ground. And they've decided this conversation happens here so everyone knows it happened. Lucky was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sal." Bruni went very still. "You know my name. I know your name. I know your address. I know your sister lives on Prince Street above the bakery, and that your nephew's 7 years old and already shows promise in school." A pause that lasted exactly long enough. "I know everything about you, Sal. I've known about this plan for 6 days." The razor did not move, but the hand holding it, almost imperceptibly, lost some of its certainty. "You're lying," Bruni said. "Am I?" Lucky's voice dropped lower. "Just for Bruni. Intimate, almost gentle. There are 4 of my men in this restaurant right now, not counting Enzo. Count the tables. Count the faces. Count who arrived before you and is still sitting." Bruni's eyes moved involuntarily, swept the room, and in the face of a man who had looked death in the eye 21 times and never blinked, something shifted. Something small, something barely visible, but it was there, the first crack. "You're still going to bleed," Bruni said, but the conviction was different now, thinner. Lucky let 3 full seconds pass. "Sal," he said again, same voice, "I'm going to give you one opportunity. Take the razor away. Leave through the front door. Go back to whoever sent you and tell them the answer is no. All of it. Brooklyn, the waterfront, the commission. No. And if I don't, then this evening becomes something you can't walk back from. And neither can the people who sent you." Another pause. "Then you have until I finish this sentence to decide." The sentence ended. The razor came away from Lucky's throat. Not because Bruni was afraid. He would have said later that he wasn't afraid, that it was calculation. That something in the geometry of the room had shifted, and the numbers no longer added up, but the men who were watching. Enzo, the 4 men Lucky had placed throughout the restaurant 6 days ago when his informant had first brought him news of the plan. Those men would say something different. They would say that when Lucky spoke the second time, something changed in Bruni's eyes. That he had gone in holding a razor and come out holding a decision, and that the decision was made by a man who understood, in the marrow, that the person he was holding the razor to had not been surprised, had never been surprised, had been waiting. Bruni walked out. His partner backed up behind him, weapon still raised until the door closed. The restaurant remained silent for 3 full seconds after the door shut. Then Lucky picked up his glass of Barolo, took the first sip, and looked at Idareto Rossi. "You were saying something about Newark," Lucky said. "To understand what happened in the next 72 hours, you need to understand something that Lucky Luciano grasped before almost anyone else in the American underworld. Mercy is not softness. Letting Sal Bruni walk out of Chez Louis on his own legs was not kindness. It was architecture. It was the deliberate construction of a narrative that would travel faster and further than any act of violence could have, because here was the story that spread through Little Italy before midnight. Lucky Luciano sat at his corner table, had a razor pressed to his throat by one of the most dangerous knife men in New York, and spent the encounter asking questions in the same tone he used to discuss shipping rates. Never reached for a weapon, never raised his voice, never showed one visible second of fear. Then gave the man a chance to leave, and the man took it. That story in their world was worth 100 corpses, because it didn't just say Lucky was dangerous. It said Lucky was untouchable in a way that had nothing to do with how many guns he had. And it said something else too, something the men who'd said Bruni would spend the next 68 hours thinking about very carefully. He knew. He knew for 6 days, and he let it happen anyway, which means he is operating on a level of confidence that should terrify us. They were right to be terrified. March 15th, 1 day after the restaurant. Lucky met with Meyer Lansky in a car on Canal Street, engine running, no destination. "They'll be expecting your response," Meyer said. "They'll be waiting for it." "How long do we let them wait?" Lucky was quiet, watching rain streak down the passenger window. Outside, the city moved without knowing it was being watched by 2 men who were deciding its future in a Buick on Canal Street. 72 hours, Lucky said. Let Bruni celebrate. Let him tell the story. Let the people who sent him believe they won something. And then, And then we remind them that sending a messenger is not the same as sending a result. Meyer understood. He didn't ask further questions. That was why Lucky trusted him more than almost anyone alive. Meyer asked only the questions that moved things forward and left the silence alone when it was doing work. Bruni, Meyer said. One word. A question and a statement simultaneously. Bruni delivers the response. Lucky said, alive. That's the point. Dead men don't carry messages. Huh. March 17th. 72 hours after the restaurant, Sal Bruni was having coffee at a social club on Hester Street. He'd spent the last 3 days allowing himself to feel, if not victorious, then at least undefeated. He'd put a razor to Lucky Luciano's throat and walked out alive. He'd told the people who sent him what Lucky said. He'd done his job. He was beginning to think it might be over. The door of the social club opened at 9:07 a.m. Meyer Lansky walked in, alone, which was the part that made everyone in the room freeze, because men like Meyer did not walk into rooms like this alone unless they were absolutely certain nothing in the room could hurt them. Sal, Meyer said, Mr. Luciano would like a word. Bruni looked at the 4 men around him, looked at the door, looked at Meyer Lansky's face, which expressed nothing at all. Where? Bruni asked. Somewhere private, Meyer said. It's not a threat. If it were a threat, you wouldn't be having coffee. Bruni went, because he understood, somewhere in the deep professional instinct of a man who had survived 21 kills, that declining this invitation would be the last decision he ever made. They drove to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Lucky was already there, standing in the center of the floor, hands in his coat pockets, looking completely relaxed. No weapons visible. No men visible. No men visible. Though Bruni knew there were men, behind every shadow, in every corner. Bruni sat in the chair they pointed him to. No ropes, no restraints. That was the first signal. You had a razor to my throat, Lucky said, conversational, like he was revisiting a meal they'd shared. 3 nights ago. I did, Bruni said. He kept his voice level, professional. Were you ever afraid during that moment? Bruni considered lying, decided against it. No. Good, I wasn't either. Lucky walked closer, stopped 6 feet away. You want to know what I was thinking? Bruni waited. I was thinking, this man is a craftsman. He moved through that restaurant the way a good surgeon moves through an operating room, quiet, precise, committed, and then he had a choice at the end. Press the blade or pull back, and he chose correctly. Lucky paused. I respect that. Even when it's aimed at me. Bruni said nothing, but his breathing changed slightly. This was not the conversation he'd been prepared for. The people who sent you, Lucky continued, made a mistake. Not by sending you, by thinking that putting a razor to my neck in a public restaurant would make me afraid, would make me negotiate, would make me give back Brooklyn, the waterfront, a commission seat. He stopped. His eyes held Bruni without blinking. They don't understand what fear costs me. They think it's free. They think showing everyone that Lucky Luciano can be threatened weakens me. It doesn't. You want to know what it does? What? Bruni asked. The word came out smaller than he intended. It shows everyone exactly how I respond to threats. Lucky's voice dropped to almost nothing. And now they know. A silence filled the warehouse. Cold, dense, absolute. Then Lucky said, here's what happens now. I'm going to let you walk out of this building. Again, you're going to go back to whoever sent you and deliver them a message. Word for word. What message? Tell them the answer is still no. Tell them it was always going to be no. Tell them I knew about the plan before they'd finished making it. Tell them I let it happen in that restaurant because I wanted New York to see what I look like when someone puts steel to my throat. He straightened. And tell them that the next person they send to give me a message doesn't come home. Bruni was quiet. Go, Lucky said. Bruni stood, walked to the door, stopped, turned. Why let me go again? He asked. Lucky looked at him for a long moment. Because killing you proves I'm dangerous, Lucky said. Letting you deliver this message proves something more important. He turned away. Deliberately, slowly, the most psychologically devastating thing a man in Lucky's position could do. He turned his back on a man called Sal Bruni while Sal Bruni was still in the room. It proves I'm certain. Sal Bruni delivered the message. Every word. The men who'd sent him were silent for a very long time after he finished. One of them, later, confided to a priest in a confession that history probably didn't record accurately, that what broke them wasn't the content of the message. It was the image that arrived with it. Lucky Luciano, turning his back. The Brooklyn numbers stayed Lucky's. The waterfront stayed Lucky's. The commission seats stayed Lucky's. Salvatore Maranzano's surviving loyalists dissolved as a unified faction within 8 months. Not through violence. Lucky never moved against them directly. They simply stopped believing they could win. And organizations that stop believing they can win stop functioning before anyone has to fire a single shot. Sal Bruni left New York in the spring of 1935. He surfaced eventually in Tampa, then New Orleans, then disappeared from the historical record entirely. Lucky Luciano was deported to Italy in 1946. From Palermo, in a cafe 12 years later, a journalist asked him about the razor, about that Tuesday night in March, the soup that went cold, the Sheffield steel, the silence of a restaurant full of people watching something happen that most of them couldn't quite believe was real. Lucky was quiet for a moment. He was good, Lucky said. Bruni, the best they had, came in correctly, positioned correctly, knew exactly what he was doing. A pause. If he'd come for violence, it would have been over before Enzo got out of his chair. Why didn't he? Lucky picked up his coffee. Because they didn't send him for violence, he said. They sent him for fear, and fear was the one thing I was never going to give them. He drank. Set the cup down carefully. You can survive a razor. You cannot survive letting people believe they own your fear. That's the thing they never understood. And Bruni? Lucky looked past the journalist at the street beyond the cafe window. Palermo, his city, once. His island. He'd been born here, left young, built an empire elsewhere, and been returned here by men who thought exile was punishment. He almost smiled. Bruni understood, Lucky said. By the end, you could see it in his face, the second time when he left the warehouse. He knew exactly what I was doing and why. A pause. That's why I let him go. Because he understood? Because men who understand, Lucky said, don't come back. Lucky Luciano, 1897-1962. The man who sat still while steel touched his throat. The architect who turned a razor into a message. The boss who proved that the most dangerous response to a threat is absolute certainty. If this story showed you what real power looks like, hit subscribe. We're uncovering the moments when staying still was more terrifying than violence. When letting someone walk away was the most devastating thing a man could do. Turn on notifications. These stories go deep. Drop a comment. What was the real weapon here? The razor or the silence? Lucky Luciano always knew the difference.